Welcome, everyone, to Gramercy Books Author Night, featuring best-selling author Lisa Scottoline and her latest novel, What Happened to the Bennetts, where a family must choose between law and justice. I want to thank the Columbus Bar Association for being Gramercy's community partner for this virtual author program. I'm Linda Cass. We're live streaming this program through Zoom webinar, and it will be recorded. Let me quickly preview the next hour or so for you. After our introductions, Lisa will talk about her new book for 20 to 30 minutes. I'll pop back on the screen and will help moderate the next 20 minutes or so for your questions. You should submit them at any time during this program in the Q&A box, and that icon is typically located at the bottom of your screen. Those questions that are liked by others will be upvoted, which means they'll rise to the top and most likely be asked. Another tool is the chat box. This allows you to chat among yourselves, but I'm sure you're going to want to really be listening to Lisa. Please click now, though, on the chat box. And it's going to open a column on the right side of your screen with links to our April author programs where tickets remain available. For in-person events, we do require proof of vaccination, and we encourage attendees to wear masks during those events to ensure everyone's safety. So first, on Thursday, April 7th, that's this Thursday, we'll be hosting Michelle Herman in the bookstore. She launches her latest novel, Close Up. It's a true gem. Obviously, there's a magician involved, and she'll be in conversation with story scientist and author Angus Fletcher. And then in partnership with the Miami Book Fair and participating booksellers on April 12th at 7, Gramercy Books will co-host a virtual conversation between novelist and journalist Anna Quindlen and author-producer Kelly Corrigan to celebrate the publication of Quindlen's Write for Your Life, a clarion call for everyone to pick up a pen and find yourself. And then on April 19th, at 7, we feature a double book launch of Stuart O'Nean's Ocean State and Susan Straight's Mecca. And these two master storytellers will be together in a virtual conversation. Finally, we return in person for our Gramercy Book Club on April 27th at 7, when we feature the just released today and very buzzed about novel by Jennifer Egan, The Candy House. And for that discussion, Nick White, noted author and Ohio State University English professor, will be moderating. You can click on the link to any of these programs to learn more about them, as well as to register, and you can learn about all of Gramercy Books author programs on our website and through our e-newsletter. Sign up for that newsletter at gramercybooksbexley.com. Now, let's meet tonight's special guest. And I'm going to pull her book over here. On the heels of her highly lauded foray into historical fiction with Eternal, Lisa Scottoline has returned with a pulse-pounding new novel, What Happened to the Bennetts? A suburban dad and his family are driving on a quiet Pennsylvania road from their daughter's lacrosse game, and the unimaginable happens to change their lives forever. I will leave it to Lisa to share elements of her book and her process with you in a moment. Lisa Scottoline, along with being a dear friend to Gramercy Books, is the New York Times bestselling author of 33 novels. You get that? 33. She has 30 million copies of her books in print in the United States, and she's been published in 35 countries. She also writes a weekly column with her daughter for the Philadelphia Inquirer, has served as president of Mystery Writers of America, and taught a course she developed, Justice in Fiction, at the University of Pennsylvania Law School, her alma mater. She lives in the Philadelphia area, and I understand she has an array of disobedient pets. Lisa, it's a thrill to welcome you back to Gramercy Books and to share your exciting novel with our Central Ohio community.
Linda, you are the best. You are just the best. I adore you. I appreciate so much your having me. I love the store. I miss the store. I wish I could be back there. We had such a wonderful time in the before times. And this is just a really special night to me. It happens to be the last, but not the least stop on this tour. But I really have been looking forward to this. I just think, and anybody listening, I'm so glad you're here. I know this is probably your community, Linda, but I want to say for people who might be new to it, I hope that you will support this incredible, incredible independent bookstore. It is one of the best in the country. And when I just listened to your introduction about who you're having, it's such an amazing thing that you're doing for everybody who listens and for your community in Bexley and Columbus generally. It's a remarkable thing. I know how much work it takes. I know you have an incredible staff, and I just want to send you some love and thanks for all the people listening. It is just invaluable. Books heal, and I think they'll get us through this time. And I'm just so grateful to you and really give you so much credit for doing what you do.
Oh, you're a sweetheart. And I want to give you a virtual hug. And just to tell everyone, thank you so much for being with us tonight. And I am going to exit off the screen in 1 second. But first, I just want to say I'll be back to help moderate the questions and to please put those questions in the Q&A box. And we're going to have a great time tonight. Thanks. And I can't wait to see you again in a minute, Lisa.
Thank you, Linda. Well, thank you all so much for being here. This is just wonderful. And what I would like to do tonight, and I think I've spoken before in Bexley, and I think that this group is so thoughtful that I just what I'd like to do and what I'd like to do tonight is kind of tell you the ideas and the themes and what gave rise to this book. It's entitled What Happened to the Bennetts. And we can talk about the plot a little, but I kind of want to go a little deeper than that if I can tonight. And I'll just begin by saying that first I wanted to greet the people, say thank you, but also greet the people who have just found me. I think that an incredible bookstore like Gramercy has really found me new people. And I think my last book, I've noticed that there are a lot of people who have discovered me after 30 years. First off, better late than never, girls or guys. I'm happy to have you, and I'm very grateful. Let me explain a little what I'm talking about, because this is the novel Eternal. And as Linda was so kind to say, it was my first foray into historical fiction. After 30 odd novels and also 9 works of nonfiction humorous memoir. And so I'd always wanted to write that book, and I won't go into that now. I think there's actually a previous talk I've given at Gramercy Books about that. But I must tell you, I was very nervous about writing that book because I hadn't done it before. There was a historical accuracy to it. It was based on a real life that was shocking incident, that what happened to the Jews of Rome under fascism and then eventually under Nazi occupation. And I really wanted to write about that because I am so interested in the relationship of law and justice to people. And I also thought that was a travesty that it hadn't been written about yet. So I said, okay, you got to do it, even though you don't write historical fiction. And what I learned, and why I'm mentioning it now, is that what I've learned and what is so cool about being in books, whether you're reading them or writing them, I think we're always learners. People who read are lifelong learners. Every time you pick up a book, you're saying, I want to know something new. Show me something new. Teach me a different viewpoint. Take me to a different setting. Let me walk in someone else's shoes. You know, the ultimate expression of empathy. I always think back to Kill a Mockingbird, when Atticus Finch says to Jem, to Scout, you never really know what someone's life is like until you walk in their shoes. And you do that every time you pick up a novel. That's why I secretly think that people who read a lot become more inclusive in their worldview. It's not just a matter of educating yourself. It's a matter of opening your mind and your soul and your heart. So I digress. But in any event, what I learned from writing Eternal, and then going back to what I write generally, which is people call a domestic thriller, but I just call a novel, honestly, that isn't slow. My job is not to bore you. So that what I learned about historical fiction versus the so-called domestic thriller in What Happened to the Bennetts is that, honestly, I'm just going to tell you from the horse's mouth, because I'm kind of the horse in this situation, that, which I couldn't be single enough, now I just said that, but there is really, the distinction between historical fiction and thrillers is an illusion. It's what lawyers would say, and since I used to be one, I can say to you that there's an expression of distinction without a difference. What it really means is that it's a superficial distinction. It's the distinction between form and substance, so that the form is different in Eternal. It's a story set in the 1930s Rome under fascism, and it's about a love triangle set then. And what happened to the Bennetts is a story of a family, and we'll talk more about that, set in modern day Pennsylvania and Delaware. And you know what? That doesn't matter at all. That is the superficiality. What thematically, they're connected one to the other. In fact, one follows very naturally. And if you've been an English major my whole life, which honestly I do since I live alone and I have nothing else to do, I go, oh my God, you must be interested in that because that's what you keep writing about. And so these themes of love and family and justice and the relationship of law to people and the purpose of law in society is something that is always going to be percolated under the surface in my novels. And so that's why Eternal, even though it looks different, isn't very different at all from Bennett's. If you liked Eternal, you'll love Bennett's and vice versa. But it's more interesting vis-a-vis what we're talking about. So when we come to Bennett's, as Linda was nice enough to say, the top line story is this. Family driving home from a kid's game, 4 people in the car, a husband and a wife, teenagers in the back seat. All of a sudden, the father who's driving notices that they are being tailgated. And before they know it, they are being carjacked. And the next thing that happened is the carjacking goes terribly, horribly, tragically wrong. And the family, by the very next morning, finds themselves in the Federal Witness Protection Program. Boom, that's a thriller. I will say to you that, I should mention this because my publisher would be happy. It got picked as People Magazine Book of the Week, which is very, very nice. But that top line plot isn't all that's happening in this novel. And since we get to talk a little more thoughtfully here, I'll explain it. You say, where did you get the idea? As much as I want to impress you, because you're all smarties, the idea came from me driving on the very street that's in the book and getting tailgated. Not by a black truck, but by a white truck. And going, why is this guy riding my bumper? And then I said, what if? A lot of novels come out of what if, because I'm in the world, I live in the world, I like to write books that people can relate to. And you go, well, what would happen? And then I knew when I got home that I had a book. But what's interesting about that when I started to write the story, you know, our job as authors, the maxim is show, don't tell, right? I'm not supposed to tell you stuff. I'm supposed to show you things about character. And I said, well, Lisa, you've just given yourself a pretty hard assignment, in addition to the fact that I don't write with an outline. So basically, I get this crazy idea about a botched carjacking, and I sit down right at this desk. And in this room, that's only research books. My fiction is in another room, and it's signed. That's how much I love books. But I said to myself, well, you've got to really illustrate something about these characters, and you better do it pretty quick, because this horrible thing that happens isn't going to allow for a lot of initial character development. And I said, well, listen, this is me talking to myself, use the stimulus of the carjacking, because when you think about it, the tailgating, when you are being tailgated, you are going to react in character. Not everybody will react the same way. How you react tells the reader something, and maybe how you would react would change. For example, I've always hated tailgaters. I hate tailgaters. In the old days, I might have thrown him a bird. I am from South Philly after all, and that we speak that language, if you understand what I'm saying. I don't do that anymore because it's not worth it, and too many people have guns. And so, but always I move aside. I want to play games. I don't want to get involved. I don't want to fuss. And I saw these characters in this car. And so here's how everybody starts to react. The wife's in the passenger seat. She's on Facebook because everyone's on the phone at all times, constantly, on the way home. And she basically is posting pictures from the game. Oh, congratulations, Emily, MVP, yoo-hoo, woo-hoo, exclamation point. Kids in the backseat. Daughter is on texting all her friends. Their thumbs are unbelievable. They make incredible use of their thumbs, more than we ever did in my generation. She's having a great time. Young son, preteen in the backseat, he says to the dad, Dad, they have a new car. It's a Mercedes. They're feeling a little good about that. Step on the gas, Dad. Burn this guy. We can smoke this guy now. That's what a guy would say. A kid that age, this kid in particular, would say that. He's excited. He counts down the days till he gets his driver's license. Well, who is the main character? The main character is Jason Bennett. For my first 25 novels or so, I think I only wrote women main characters because honestly, especially if you start life in crime fiction, the women were a lot second bananas and I was tired of that. And also I grew up on Nancy Drew. And so I wanted to see a woman in the driver's seat in fiction, which was great. And then I said, well, do you want to write men? I mean, you've divorced two of them, so you obviously know an awful lot about them. But also, I was super close to my dad, and I love men. So I'm like, and I wanted to formulate this character for this time. And I'll tell you why. Jason Bennett is driving this car, and he doesn't want to rush. He's not being a jerk about it. He's not a right fighter. He just says to his family, I have the right to enjoy the drive. I'm a scenic route kind of guy. That's how he views himself. And that is a good kind of character to have at the beginning of a novel and here's something terrible that's going to happen and what is going to happen next. Also, when you're writing something that you're kind of really tell the story compactly, as contrast to Eternal, when you want to talk about the difference in these two types of novels. Eternal is a novel that takes place over 20 years. It involves three families and is the relationship of law to justice inter se between those things. But when you come to what happened to the Bennetts, it's a single family. It's told at a single point of view. And there you go. The story begins. So I want to also, in addition to tell you something about his character, I want to underline a little bit what's about to happen next. Because what happens next, and I don't want to give anything away, as Linda was so kind to say, is that they're going to be in the Federal Witness Protection Program. And I'm not going to tell you more than that. That happens right away in the book. And so they are taken to Delaware. Now, why does that matter? Thematically, I have to make you understand how this relates to this character. Setting is important because it relates to character and not for really any other reason. I shouldn't say it. For me, not for any other reasons. I am trying to make everything I pick, every decision I make in what happened to the Bennetts, inform something, reinforce something, or drive the plot forward. So I say, well, look, this is a family that's all of a sudden, because in federal witness protection, you have to go that night. And by the way, federal witness protection was designed, as you may know, to protect bad guys, right? It was in a program designed for organized crime and take an organized criminal, or a not so organized criminal, I guess, if he gets caught, and he gets put in the witness protection program. Generally, those guys are pretty happy to be put there. A, because you're saving their life. And B, they get a stipend, they get relocated, they get a whole new life. I'm lucky enough, having written 30 books, to have some contacts. So I had a wonderful contact in the FBI who worked in witness protection. And so he helped me with this because I couldn't quite wrap my mind around the fact that basically this was going to not be a family that has committed felonies. This is going to be a normal family that is actually caught in the crosshairs of a dangerous criminal organization and needs protection. But they are whisked away to federal witness protection, and their life is changed on a dime, horribly. Because unlike felons who don't have a lot of connections and are not on Facebook, this family is very, very connected. The wife has tons of girlfriends. It's kind of like me. The guy has a business. She has a business. The kids are on Snapchat. The kids are on Instagram. They got soccer practice, lacrosse, violin lessons, SAT prep. They are all of a piece with the world in which we live, and they are wrenched out of it that night. And I go to myself, how are you going to outline this? How are you going to reinforce this concept for the reader in the setting? Simple. I take this character, I say, this is the kind of guy he is. I allow him to think for a minute. He was raised on a farm in Hershey, Pennsylvania. Ohio, Pennsylvania, they're a lot alike. The terrain is very, very similar. I live in rural Pennsylvania. I am a terra firma kind of girl. I actually live on a farm. I have chickens. They're really old. I have 14-year-old hens. They don't have eggs. I don't have eggs. It's great. Anyway, where is he going to go in witness protection? Well, they would send you to Delaware for the initial period of 6 months when you're actually applying to the program. And that period of the program is administered by the FBI until you are turned over to the U.S. Marshal Service. Why does that matter? Why in Delaware? Where in Delaware? I said to myself, I started driving around Delaware. The beach line of Delaware, coastal Delaware, is a really interesting setting in what happened to the Bennetts. And here's why. It's a saltwater marsh along the coastline of Delaware. It's watery. Not only that, it's tidal, so that the tides are going in and out. I just defined tidal for you. That's great, Lisa. But also why that matters is this house that they have him in is on stilts. And all of a sudden, the tides come in and they go out, and the water is changing the contours of the land. And all of a sudden, Jason Bennett, who is a terra firma kind of guy, raised on a farm in Hershey, feels at sea. He no longer has solid ground beneath his feet. He is standing in a marsh. He is completely dislocated. And when you think about research, I did a lot of research for this, but one of the interesting stories I can tell you is that I drive down during the pandemic and I go wander around the marshes of this area of Delaware. And it's fascinating and amazing. Now, this was the time in the pandemic, by the way, where if you remember the news stories that were like nature's taking over, and nature was taking over. Like the place that I found, which would be vacation homes. And now picture this, because Witsec takes him to basically a beach town, but it's off season. So it's like a ghost town, right? And this family has a ghost in their family, which you will read about. Among the things you see in this marsh is something that is actually called a ghost forest, which I went to at night. A ghost forest is created, unfortunately, by climate change, when salt water comes in and kills the trees at the root. The trees don't fall over because they're kind of strong. All of the leaves fall off, most of the branches, and they turn white, so that when you go to a forest in the nighttime, you can imagine how terrifying a sight this is. If you can't imagine it, you can read it in What Happens to the Bennetts, because they're literally in a ghost town, in a ghost forest, and they have ghosted all of their friends. And Jason feels that loss of land under his feet. And when I was on that beach among all this nature, trying to imagine him, and a little bit he's like me, because I'm not that great. First off, I can't even swim. Second off, I don't know a lot about the beach. And all of the bird sounds were unfamiliar. And then all of a sudden, what flew over my head was a great blue heron. Now, I am telling you, I don't know if you even know what I'm talking about. You probably do, because you're more sophisticated than I am. But I started life in South Philly, so I don't know a lot about great blue herons. And when I saw this thing, I've never seen a bird like that in my life. It was huge. Like, I have dogs that aren't as big as a great blue heron. And it is flapping, and it is so close that I feel and I hear the flapping, and I'm like, oh my God, I actually ducked, which shows you what a dork I am. But it's like, you would think it was like a plane or something, but it wasn't even that close. But it was the beauty of nature, the power of nature, the majesty of it, the angularity of this bird, its grace in flight. I used all of that in the book. I said, oh my God, this is something. You have a novel. All of this scene will reinforce his senses come alive there at the same time. He's hurting so much inside. And you imagine yourself in Witsec. I wanted you to look at it both ways. Imagine that all of a sudden you leave everything. You think the pandemic was bad? You don't even have Zoom. You can't communicate with anybody online. The hardest thing I imagine, I go, what would be so hard about this? Because I have to think, what would be so hard about this? Francis Ford Coppola, the great director of The Godfather, said, nothing in my movies ever happened, but all of it is true. What he's getting at is that there's an emotional truth to movies he makes. And that's true of all of the best of the arts. So when I'm trying to write What Happened to the Bennetts, I go, what's emotionally true about this? How would you feel? Well, to me, the hardest thing would be that I couldn't tell my friends not to worry, because they would worry, because little Lisa is always on time. We started their Zoom. I was ready 10 minutes before. I was like this. I'm never late. If I'm 15 minutes late, it's all over. You should call 911. And I tell and maybe because I live alone, if I go away for 10 days, here I have dogs, I have cats, as I said, I have hens, I even have horses. There's a lot of things there's lists of numbers, and I have a chicken vet. These numbers on a list. I don't leave here without telling 300 people. Imagine if you can't. And I couldn't even believe that this is how the witness protection program works, but it does for someone, a family like this. Lucinda, the wife in the book, she has she's a studio photographer. She has a mother who's in assisted living and in memory care. She has to leave her mother, and she has to not even tell her mother where she is. Imagine, conversely, you're the family of all of a sudden you're on a street. This is a normal family that live in the suburbs. All of a sudden your neighbors are gone. Well, that's weird, because you know the habits of your neighbors, don't you? I know mine, and they know, well, vice versa. I walk the dogs about for an hour around the block. We know when the recycling's out. I know their dogs. They know mine. We say, hi, hi, hi. I know when they're away. Sometimes they'll say, keep an eye on the house. I mean, what if all of a sudden your family's gone? And that was such an interesting exercise for me as a person who loves stories and is a storyteller. And honestly, that's not because I'm an author, it's just because I'm a human being. We all tell stories and we love stories, right? If you're lucky enough to come home at the end of the day or wherever and someone goes, "How was your day?" You're going to tell the story of your day. Good. And I think we're a country that loves storytellers, but that's a different subject. In any event, what I learned was in the absence of an explanation about where are the Bennetts and what happened to the Bennetts, all of a sudden, people around the Bennetts start inventing stories. Because the truth is that nature really does abhor a vacuum and everybody steps into it. So Lucinda's best friend, I mean, girlfriends are awesome. I have friends. My best friend has been my best friend for 40 years. My assistant's my best friend, been 30 years. I mean, we tell each other everything. If I just disappeared, they would be going to the police station and hounding them, right? Because God bless women. We are real bulldogs when we're protecting somebody else. Maybe not always for ourselves, but to protect our friends. We'd be all over it. Lucinda's best friends all over it. They can't even say, the family's like, FBI, can't we just say, tell them not do it? No, you can't tell them. If you tell them not to worry, what's the guarantee they're not going to tell everybody else? And you endanger them. Well, that's the only way that would stop me. I don't want to put a friend in danger. And then the next thing that happens, I don't want to give too much away and I'm not. But basically, in the absence of this explanation, other people start to step in. Some of the speculation online isn't so nice. And then there's a phenomenon you might know about, which is people who are very interested in true crime, as am I. I watch all those shows. I read Ann Rule and all the other people who write about it. There's people in the world now who have laptops, and God bless them. I don't blame them. They're trying to solve crime. I actually like that. I think it's really great if more people are involved in justice and trying to get justice. Police departments can only do so much. Their manpower is limited and their budgets. And by the way, if it's your kid, you're going to be on that laptop. You're going to be getting Freedom of Information Act documents. Everyone is trying to solve crime, and that happens in what happened to the Bennetts, and they're trying to solve the crime. What I started to write, and as I said, I don't write with an outline, which is probably foolhardy, but I'm not about to change it 35 years in. But the truth is that when I talked to my FBI guy, I said, listen, what's your track record? And he said, we've never lost anybody. The FBI, federal protection run by the U.S. Marshal Service, has never lost anybody in federal witness protection as long as they follow the rules. And the rules are very, very clear, as you can read in the book. So I said to myself, that's interesting, because really, in a way, an extrinsic threat, bad guys coming at the Bennetts, isn't the most interesting problem. A much more interesting problem for this family, a problem that I would have, even though I'm just a family of one and my daughter in New York, and your family might have, or you might have, is that the threat comes from within in what happened to the Bennetts. That Lucinda, separated from her wife, her mom, and her friends, and the life she knows and the business she loves, and dealing with the crisis in her life, begins to become depressed. The son starts to go inward, starts to sleep too much, doesn't want to eat, starts to become anxious. Jason is left, dealing with all of his emotional angst, but also realizing that his family, and this is where we get to the bigger theme that was a lot like an Eternal, and I'll sum up, that his family is going under. The threat is from within. And even though the federal witness protection can keep them safe, what starts to even happen then is his faith erodes. And I really wanted to write a novel that moves fast. You can call it a thriller, I'm fine with that. But the truth is, it's a novel that is about justice in a time, frankly, where justice is uncertain. I have been a lawyer, I've been an adjunct law professor, I've been a paralegal. My whole life I've studied law and justice, and as it relates to fiction and the arts. I will tell you that 25 years ago, if I wrote a legal thriller, nobody knew anything about the Supreme Court. If you said sidebar, you would have to define what that meant. Then came OJ and everybody figured out what that meant. And now we're in a place where not only do you know who's on the Supreme Court, but you have a lot of opinions and you might even be in the street. Our faith on our institutions is undergoing an upheaval. And they are the institutions that administer justice: the Supreme Court, the court system, policing, the Department of Justice, the FBI. We have views about the FBI. We got a lot of views. We got Ajita, we got Michigas, we got it all. Because honestly, that's what I started to think about in these past couple of years, seeing what is going on. When you think about the purpose of law, the purpose of law is to prevent might from making right. The purpose of law is to order our conflicts so that we don't commit violence against each other. Putin invading it, right? Zelensky today saying international law, help me. We are seeing that the ultimate purpose of law, to me, in this country, when you look at what the founders wrote, what the Constitution's about and the Bill of Rights, is that law is inextricably related to peace and happiness. We are unhappy because we don't have faith in law of late. We are not seeing justice, and that has an effect on our psyche. I'll suggest to you that's what I think is happening. And so when you write into that debacle, you can't tell the old story like I wrote a book 30 years ago that will have law leading to justice. It's just not modern, and it's not true. And truth is in this amalgam too, in this bollocks and this bollocksed up kind of bolus of what is legal and what is ethical and what is moral, and why does all of it matter? When you are writing into a time of lawlessness, well, I have a character, Jason Bennett, who finds that he cannot rely on any of the institutions. But I'm not a nihilist. I have to find a way out of it. He has to find a way out of it. And that's what I think this novel does. And frankly, what I've come to realize is I think that's what every novel that I've written does, which is it's an ordinary person. Let me finish by saying this. We love to think, I think about what is a hero. Anytime I'm writing about, a guy in the lead, what is a hero? A woman in the lead, what is a heroine? We think a lot about power in our society vis-a-vis personal power. There is a reason that Spider-Man movies make $500 million. Right? We're interested in notion of powers. We're interested in superpower. What are the extent of the powers of an ordinary person? Take a movie like Spider-Man and then take a movie like Coda. I'm not criticizing. I love them both. I love our culture. But they're both to some extent about the limits and the contours of personal power and abilities or disabilities. And I wanted to create a guy in Jason Bennett who doesn't see himself as a hero and doesn't think he has superpowers. In other words, just one of us who finds himself in this impossibly difficult situation, undergoing hardship, and has to figure out a way that there's no one he can rely on. What is his answer? Self-reliance. That's always been an answer for us in this country, back from Whitman, back from Emerson. We have always looked to ourselves. And I do think when I think about anything I've written and a lot of books I've loved, they end up being about the individual finding power and resources they didn't know that they had within them. Briefly put, Eternal, at the end of Eternal, there's a character, and I'm not giving anything away, but it's been World War. They're at the end of World War II. There is a character in the book who has to give a speech. When I was writing that novel, she had never said 2 words in the book. I'm like, oh my God, Lisa, this is why you need an outline. You're at the end of your book. This lady has to say stuff, and she's never said a word. Like, that's practically literary malpractice. You're going to get fired, But then I said, no, lean into it. There's a reason she hasn't spoken for, which she explains. She's always in the kitchen, either in the kitchen at the restaurant or the kitchen at the house. But she says to herself, at the end of this war, after the hardship is over, she is looking at the table. She sees people she loves, but she sees people she lost. She sees ghosts. She misses those people. I feel that way. We have that feeling as we go on and we lose people. They're never far. And that bittersweet feeling is something we know. But what she says is she's a cook. So she opens her, little refrigerator and she says, I know what I want to make, but I don't have the ingredients I need. And so every night before I cook a meal, I say to myself, what can I make with what I have? And I thought that is the question of every survivor. People everywhere, whether you've been affected by COVID, whether you're affected, whatever hardship, illness, financial difficulty, all the horrible things that life will bring you that you have to get through. Our question, the one that calls us to our best self, to our strongest self, is what can I do with what I have? And that's what Jason Bennett finds himself doing in What Happened to the Bennetts, trying to find what he can do with what he has to save himself and to save his family when there's nobody you can rely on anymore but yourself. That's really what it's about. So let's maybe open it up to questions now, because I probably have forgotten things and I want to be able to answer your questions too. You all really matter to me and I'm very grateful you're here. And so anything you want to ask about, I'm happy to talk about.
Well, I'm back and you are wonderful. This was absolutely extraordinary, Lisa. I took notes because I was so excited as a writer myself.
Thank you.
And I love, what can I do? With what I have. I mean, that's it. Well, we have a lot of questions here. So let me try to put them in an order with, let's see here. This question was very interesting because you touched a lot about the legal system. So let's hit that right now.
Okay.
As a lawyer and a writer, Anne wants to know, how do you think storytelling can help us restore confidence in the legal systems?
I think partly in the way I said that you can, I mean, it's crazy, but I find myself, I draw inspiration from things I read and from what I write. It's crazy, but I feel like to a certain extent, it's a little bit of a pep talk. And I think when you read a novel like that, you undergo that threat. And if it comes out, and it has to come out, it can't be some deus ex machina, here's somebody going to save you. I mean, the whole point of What Happened to the Bennetts is ain't nobody coming to save you. But it's how can you save yourself? I think you actually go through that. I also think as a personal matter that even as difficult as these times are, I do think that I think that what happens in the Bennetts has happened writ large across society because we are more active, 30 years politically than ever before. I mean, that's a good thing. Unfortunately, there's some shouting and some intolerance. Well, there's more than some intolerance, but that I remember way back going 40 years ago when the hard question was, how can we get people to vote? And we were really trying to get people to vote. That's why I think voting, as a lawyer, as a constitutionalist, voting rights are sacrosanct. Anyone trying to abridge voting rights is harming democracy. But we have come a long way where we were begging people to vote, and now we're trying to prevent them from voting. My point is this: we are pushing back. The great thing about law, and answer to the question, is that it's not God made. We make it. We elect people. We make our voices known. I've donated. I've signed petitions. I've marched. I've done more than I ever have in my life. And this is a participatory democracy now. And that's a good thing. And God knows we're so lucky to be born in this country. We're so lucky we can participate. We're so lucky we can yell and scream back and hold up signs and not have people come and haul us off the street. They're dying for rights that we take for granted. Mm-hmm. And so that's a long way of answering the question, but I believe that the answer is the power of one a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Great. Well, here's a question from Teresa, looking at sort of a lot of the things you've done. You've written so many books over the years. Which do you like writing better? She wants to know, standalone books or serial novels? And how do you with the serial novels, how do you keep them interesting from book to book? She wanted to know.
Right. That's a really cool question because I did write a series about a all-woman law firm, and I miss them, and they're going to come back, Rosado and Associates. And the interesting thing is everything is a different writing exercise as it is a different reading exercise. So that in a standalone, here's the book, right? It starts on the page, there's the family, they go through something, and it ends. I think Rosado says it might be a 17 book arc. Mm-hmm. And what is so cool about that is that, you are living with these characters and it's almost real time, and they grow and change. So that a way like a single character will grow and change within 350 pages, they grow and change over a much longer time. It gives you the time to examine. It's like episodic television that way. I kind of love it because, as I said, I've friends for 40 years. We've seen each other through everything. And I love that examination. At the same time, I feel so lucky in this job. And that's why I'm so grateful to places like Gramercy Books and booksellers like you and owners like you and readers like you guys, because you've enabled me to write different things. Listen, I'm just being real with you. Writing Eternal after you've written 30 thrillers that's a bit of a risk. And I kind of lost my job. But luckily, I knew I could not do it. I knew I had to do it. And my publisher was terrifically supportive. And happily, we made a go of it. And because readers were open-minded and came to it. And if you look at those online reviews, they'll say, like, I usually read her. I don't really read historical fiction, but I like her books. And wow, I really like this. And that's a great thing about readers. I read really widely. I read nonfiction. I read all kinds of stuff. None of us read just one book. I would read all of those books you showed at the beginning, Linda. I'd love to go every single one of those events. I read Goon Squad, a Stuart Onan I've been reading for years. I know every single, people in Connecticut and getting into trouble. I love it. It's basically a domestic novel, like I'm writing. So I forget what the point of all of that was. Oh man, I got carried away. But, so the question is, how do you keep it fresh and interesting? It's fresh and interesting for me. And everybody has something. I mean, my God, everybody has something. And if you're not having these extrinsic things, pandemic, somebody gets sick, so your kid does the crap that happens, there's intrinsic things that happen. Your mood changes, you whatever that is. And that happens in real life, and it happens in the novels I write. So Mary D'Annunzio had a baby, and I have to figure out what's going to happen next with her. And I think it's going to be I'm actually writing a new historical. I'm almost finished, entitled Sacred, which we can talk about if you want. But after that, I think it'll be a Rosado, because I miss those women. Novels get real to me, and whether I read them or write them. So I want to see those characters again.
Your excitement and enthusiasm is so evident, and you pour it into your stories, which is why your stories are so exciting. And so, you just can't stop turning those pages. Actually, there were two questions, Lisa, that I'm going to combine. Jean wanted to know if it's more difficult to write historical fiction or thrillers, because you were talking, you've been talking about the two having the parallels. And Samantha wondered, you already sort of answered part of her question. She said, what are you working on next? You plan to write more historical fiction.
Oh, great.
So that's kind of a combination here of
which
is harder for you or not, or how it's different in the process. And then, maybe more about this new piece of historical fiction that you're working on.
Sure. And thank you for it. I guess the funny thing is that, having said, when the research for Eternal was harder. What I've come to the conclusion of is everything's hard in different ways, just like life. They're just a different kind of hard. And that's not me complaining. You want it to be a challenge for me, so it can be lively for you. I always think of the word lively. I want it to be lively. So when I was researching Eternal, I think I was stumped, as I say to you, by the newness of it. And it daunted me. I was like, oh, I can't do it. I get scared. I'm insecure. And also that, frankly, there was an historical underpinning that I took very seriously. That what happened to the Jews of Rome in October 1943 was a story that hadn't been told in popular American fiction. And telling it, going back there and doing the research, going to a memorial service for those victims, seeing those families, I felt like at soul level that I had to do this exactly right to honor those victims. And I never had that before. I've never had that in a novel. And I didn't have it in the Bennetts. So that was a little bit of a difference. But I get so serious about everything I write, even though I joke around and stuff like this. I sit here and, tear my hair out, and where's my M&Ms? Like, this is what, yay! It's like you didn't even know how many bags I go through. It's horrifying. People are like, you have such good energy. I'm like, I'm just freaking on sugar. But vis-a-vis the last question, it's interesting, and it's kind of like when you're immersed in a book, it's kind of like all you want to talk about, because I'm almost finished it. It's called Sacred. And it's interesting because it has touches a little like Eternal did. It's about the rise. The setting is the rise of the mafia in the 1800s in Sicily. A real interesting question of lawlessness, because Sicily was a lawless place in that time. And I also wanted to touch on, because it's just horrifying, but what seems to happen is when you're looking at laws that perpetuate injustice, you will find them tending to be laws that perpetuate discrimination, and that seems to be against Jews. And so when you look at Sicily, in going back to the Inquisition in the 1400s, as you may know, the Inquisition banished Muslims and Jews from Sicily, tortured, imprisoned, forced conversion, expelled Jews from the island, with the incredibly horrifying result that there are still very few Jews in Sicily. A few years ago, Palermo, the capital of Sicily, tried to get Jews to come back. Meanwhile, all the synagogues had been converted to churches. There's no kosher butchers. There's no way you can practice the religion. And that's awful. So to me, I said, well, that's even a more specific case in point. So that book became Sacred, and it's a story about two brothers who are the first mafia family set against the last Jew in Sicily. Wow. And I think it will be a big exploration of I know what it will be, because I'm 120,000 words in, which better be the end. And, I know, first draft, Hemingway says, write drunk, edit sober. And I love that quote, because I don't write drunk, but and like the great, Annie Lamott says, give yourself permission. We've talked about this, to write a shitty first draft. Like you don't want to be in your own way on first draft. I always go to Stephen Sondheim, who says, stop wondering if your vision is new. Let others make that decision. They usually do. You keep moving on. And that's the job of the artist. You do it, and then and first draft, I just do it, and then I edit it, and then I become a judge of it, but not in first draft. So my first draft is endless.
Oh gosh, when might we expect this novel that I'm already like salivating, wanting to read?
So kind. Well, I hope I can be there by then. It will be out in March of next year. I'm hoping it will get sooner, because I'm making such good progress. I'm going to hope that we can get out sooner.
That's great.
But I know that by then I can be at Gramercy.
Oh, we want you here.
Come on. We have to have hope. I have hope.
Oh. Well, we have time for a few more questions, and we still have some questions here. And just a comment also, Susan made a lovely comment that I'll just throw in here, that she lives by Maria's toast every day since she read Your Beautiful Eternal. So just so you know, that's what Susan just said.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that. I appreciate that.
So someone asked the question, well, they made the comment that Janet Ivanovich said she doesn't read books so that she thinks about no other books.
Right.
And this person wants to know, how do you avidly read and not let it affect or distract you from the book you're writing?
Right. And I've read that Janet says that, and I love her. So, I love reading so much that I can't not. And look, then I would never get to read. And I don't know what it is. Look, here's what it probably is. Anybody who's divorced twice has a certain amount of denial operating. Okay. Like there's red flags waving, and I'm like, I'm in love. In other words, I probably I had 10 years of therapy, doesn't show. I could probably compartmentalize real easily. So I can sort of get lost in somebody else's book. And then, that sounds weird, somebody else's book, but it's like, it doesn't enter my brain, because the truth is you're creating a world, whether it's a standalone or it's What Happened to the Bennetts. These people are somewhere in Delaware in this terrible, terrible fix. And you're with them, man. You're channeling them. There's no way anything gets through that. Nothing gets through that. Not with my powers of denial. See, Janet is probably more mentally healthy than I am. That must be what it is.
Wow. Well, I do have like a question of mine because I'm just very, very curious about, you have this gift of crafting human connections in your books. And so I just wonder, do these characters, how do they, obviously fiction is invention and imagination. And
Mhm.
how do they take shape? How do they take shape? Do they come from some people, maybe you in your life? How do these characters kind of come to be? Really?
Right. And I asked myself that question. I mean, I don't take from anybody except that for these last two books, weirdly, and maybe it's because I'm getting older or maybe just relaxing with it a little more that I go, you think I get relaxed by 35 years, but I don't. So, with sort of my mother's little spirit embedded in Nona in Eternal, and then here's my dad, and now I'm fresh out of parents, so I'll have to get back to fiction. But I think what happens is if you're inventing the story as you go, then that is a really cool thing to do because you're very anxious. You don't know you have a story. But what's cool about that is what happens next is what the character does, and it also defines who the character is. So that you get that's why I always say to myself, these are little things I tell myself, but since you asked, we always say plot and character and voice are three, and we talk about those as three different elements. I'm just here to tell you, as a practitioner, like I'm in the friggin' trenches. That's a literary term. Here I am in the trenches in this computer. That it doesn't feel that way to me. It feels like all of those things are the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's like love and justice, and happiness. These are all the same kind of thing. So that because what happens next? If you start the novel. Here's a family that gets carjacked. Bad thing happens. Next room, they're in a hospital ER. Okay, what happens next gives you the next chapter, which is a plot beat, an event. Mm-hmm. It also, people are going to do things, and what they do defines who they are. And how you tell it, the story is told from Jason's point of view. His voice. His voice isn't my voice. I'm more of a wise guy. I curse. He's a better person than I am. I mean, we have some things in common, but not really. I'm much more kind of hyper or energized and whatever. But the bottom line is, so how you build the character is you see what the character does. And that is the coolest thing. And that's why I think there's something, the magic in books. We're so lucky to have this life, you and I, and all of us, because, that's the magic part. That's the part that goes, this is like life. You don't really know. You could be driving down. I mean, it's horrifying, but I just read a story the other day where there was a horrible carjacking in Washington. This stuff happens to you. And not just crime, but love, good things, bad things. And if you're trying to write about real life, having a person work their way through it, you will define a character by the end. He defines himself. Jason gets out of his comfort zone. I'm going to have to, he doesn't say it, but he comes to understand he's going to have to change who he is to survive in this new world. Isn't that a little who we all are? There's a lot of people go, I don't want to know about technology. Do you remember people saying that 10 years ago? Well, right now they're on Snapchat. And you know what I mean? We've all learned so much. We have changed and learned, and we adapt. That's how you survive.
Yes. Well, I have to share this. This is Shami, who's attending this program, says, I bought this book the day it came out, but held it to celebrate my 7th anniversary of my kidney transplant anniversary on April 3rd. Loving it. Lisa's books, especially the legal fiction, have gotten me through the years of dialysis and my transplant journey. So excited for this book. Love all the books she writes. And I mean, that's the truth. I mean, you're the best. We love you. I hope that you're going to be at Gramercy for this next book.
Absolutely.
I just want to tell everyone, because in the chat, I want to thank, first of all, I want to thank you, Lisa, because you're just fabulous and I adore you. And everyone that was watching was so engaged, asking so many wonderful questions. So thank you, audience, too, and for joining us this evening. And let your friends know about this wonderful book. And also, there were a lot of people that registered and bought the book. But for those of you who are maybe waiting and wanting to hear more about it, there's a link in the chat box, and you can just link in and get a copy, or if you have one, get a copy for your best friend. But I really am so enthused about this book,
Linda,
Lisa.
you are amazing, and thank you so much for it. And I really hope that if you don't have the book already, you will get it tonight or get another copy, because this is an amazing bookstore. They went to the trouble, they went to the expense. You don't know the stuff behind the scenes because I was in the green room, so take it from me. We need for democracy to have bookstores in our neighborhoods, just like this one. And the Bennetts community is so lucky to have it. And if we don't support it, I don't mean to be crass, but you got to open your wallet and buy a book. I don't care if you don't buy my book, buy anybody's book, but support this bookstore, because if we don't support it, we won't have it. And that is a slippery slope, because bookstores are about this connection, this love, and they're also about truth.
Well, thank you, Lisa. You're the best. I could be talking to you for hours here, and I'm sorry it's not in person. And I look forward to it being in person soon. So we'll be in touch, my dear.
Okay,
and, thank you, everyone. And it's hard to say goodbye, but we will have to do that.
I know they have lives. I don't, but they do. Thank you so much, and please stay well. And I'll be emailing you in 2 minutes.
And everyone, have a great evening, and thank you for being part of this evening. And Lisa, thank you for being who you are and giving us these precious.
You are amazing, and thanks for what you do, and thanks to everybody for coming tonight. I really love you and appreciate you.
Mwah.
Take care.
Bye.